Being in the veterinary industry is exciting, it's rewarding, and let's be honest, it's overwhelming. Regardless of whether you are a new graduate after years of studying, exams and rotations, or a seasoned pro, being the person in the exam room having to have all the answers can be mind-bending. You're leading a team, you're managing clients, and you're making medical decisions that carry real consequences. And in those moments, what determines your success isn't just how much you know. It's the habits and the mindset you bring to the table. The truth is, exceptional veterinary leaders don't thrive simply because they're the smartest, the most talented, or even the most gifted in the room. What sets them apart is their ability to approach their work with intentionality. Talent might inspire admiration, but consistency inspires trust. And in leadership, trust is the currency that everything else is built on. Now, let's be honest for a moment. We all start with good intentions, but life in a busy clinic can absolutely get in the way. How many of you struggle following through on the goals you've set? Or maybe how many of you have trouble showing up as the same version of yourself every single day? Do any of you find it hard to implement processes and stick to them? Or what about wrestling with accountability? All of these things happen not because you don't care, but because being consistent is hard. Pat Summitt, one of the greatest coaches of all time, said successful leaders do consistently what others do occasionally. That's the heart of it. Anyone can have a good day. Anyone can be excellent once. But the difference makers are those who repeat the right actions again and again until they become their identity. The challenge, of course, is that what's urgent often screams louder than what's important. The ringing phones, the full schedule, the emergencies, they demand your immediate attention. But if you always chase the urgent, you'll never build the systems and habits that give your team stability and your leadership staying power. So why does consistency matter so much? 3 reasons. It builds trust, it multiplies your impact, and it turns good intentions into lasting results. Think about it. Inconsistency, it breeds insecurity and instability. 2 things your clients and staff hate. If you've ever worked with a doctor who's constantly trying something new, you know what I mean. One day the rule is, do it this way. The next day it is, scratch that, let's try this. Or maybe you wonder which version of them is going to show up today. Calm and encouraging, or frazzled and frustrated. That unpredictability doesn't just cause confusion, it undermines confidence. On the other hand, when your communication and strategy are consistent, you create predictability, which creates stability. And stability is the soil where trust grows. People may admire your talent, but they're going to trust your consistency. Consistency also multiplies impact. You'll never become great in a single moment of leadership. You become great in the same moment repeated over time. In veterinary medicine, that looks like consistent doctor meetings, consistent leadership meetings, consistent follow-through. It looks like showing up the same way every day. The point is, when we consistently do the right things, consistency begins to compound. People sometimes ask me, how did All-Star become All-Star? How did you get from point A to point B? And the truth is, in the beginning, it was hard. I didn't know how to hire correctly. I didn't know how to train correctly. I didn't know how to create processes. Most days, I felt like I was just trying to keep my head above water. But over 20 years, I made small, consistent improvements. Not glamorous, not overnight, just steady, intentional progress. And those small things added up into the big thing that people see today. That's the power of consistency. It creates momentum. And once you build momentum, you can find your rhythm. Pre-decide. Let's unpack that because it's not a word you're going to hear every day. Pre-deciding means choosing in advance how you're going to act when a situation comes up, so you're not wasting energy in the moment debating what to do. It's setting anchors and non-negotiables for yourself. Those core habits and values that won't shift depending on your mood, the day, or the level of chaos in the clinic. Think of it like meal prepping for your brain. If you've already decided I will call every client with lab results within 24 hours, then you don't spend mental energy wondering if you should call today, or if you have time, or if the client will care. You just do it because the decision was already made before the moment arrived. That's the power of non-negotiables. It removes the guesswork and makes your actions automatic. The value here is huge. Veterinary medicine is packed with decision fatigue. You're making hundreds of micro choices every single day. What diagnostics to recommend, how to phrase an update to a worried client, when to pivot from plan A to plan B. Without anchors and non-negotiables, you end up drained, inconsistent, and sometimes paralyzed. But if you've already decided that having hard conversations is a non-negotiable part of leadership, then when a client is upset about costs, or when you need to give feedback about unrealistic expectations, you don't avoid it. You actually step into it. Pre-deciding means you've already told yourself, I will have and approach these conversations with honesty, empathy, and professionalism, no matter how uncomfortable they are. And when you've rehearsed that mindset in advance, you don't freeze in the moment. You lean on the structure that you've already created. And here's the bigger picture. Pre-deciding isn't just about medicine, it's about life. If you pre-decide that dinner with your family 3 nights a week is a non-negotiable, you don't let the chaos of your calendar steal it from you. If you pre-decide that Sunday mornings are for rest, reflection, or faith, then you don't get pulled in a million directions when someone asks you to do just one more thing. Pre-deciding protects the things that matter most, because otherwise, urgent stuff will always scream louder than important stuff. But here's the next layer. Simply hoping you'll be consistent, it's not going to get you there. Consistency comes from intentional habits, not luck or good intentions. Most of us don't just stumble into being a great surgeon or an effective leader. If you don't define your non-negotiables in advance, you'll default to reactive choices instead of intentional ones. That's why Stephen Covey said, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. Pre-deciding is about building habits around those priorities, whether it's a 5-minute daily check-in with a technician to build trust, an hour each Wednesday to practice surgical skills, reading a leadership book with your team each month, or even putting your phone away at dinner. The point is to create a structure that ensures what matters most actually happens. So let me ask you this. What's one non-negotiable you could pre-decide today that would make this next year in practice easier? What's one non-negotiable in your personal life you'd like to protect? And here's the challenge. What would your life look like if you stopped hoping for consistency and started pre-deciding for it? Whatever your answers, remember this, you can't do what you don't define. Pre-deciding is about choosing in advance what matters most, making it a non-negotiable, and then building your leadership, your medicine, and your life around those things. Pre-deciding clears the mental clutter and sets your personal compass. But let's be honest, a day in the clinic can still feel like you're herding cats. That's where mental models come in, because they might just be one of the most underrated tools you can develop as a veterinary professional. Veterinary medicine is messy. Patients show up with vague or overlapping symptoms, clients come in with their own fears, budgets, and expectations, and the day can unravel fast. If you don't have a structure for how to think through the chaos, you're going to get overwhelmed in a hurry. That's where mental models come in. Take a vomiting dog, for example. You don't just stand there hoping inspiration strikes you in the exam room. You run through your checklist: dietary indiscretion, infectious, metabolic disease, obstruction, toxins, and the list goes on. That framework keeps you thorough, but it also keeps you calm. You're not guessing. You're following a map you've already built. And when you share that with clients, here's the list of things I always check with vomiting dogs. You instantly build trust. They see a doctor with a system, not someone throwing darts in the dark. Charles Duhigg in Smarter, Faster, Better explains why mental models are so powerful. They let your brain rehearse scenarios before they happen. Think about pilots. They don't just memorize the checklist for an engine failure, they visualize it. They imagine the sound, the pressure, the steps they'll take. That rehearsal makes them calmer and more effective in the real moment because their brain has already flown that scenario. The same principle applies in our world. The most obvious place this should happen is surgery. Walking into surgery without a mental model is going to be terrifying, especially early on. But if you've already rehearsed in your head where you're positioning the patient, confirming your instruments, making the approach, the incision, isolating and ligating, closing in layers, you walk in with structure. And when, not if, complications happen, you don't panic. You know where you are in the process and what comes next. That's what lets you stay grounded when things go sideways. And here's the key. Having that structure doesn't just give you calm, it gives you confidence. Instead of second-guessing yourself in the moment, you move with purpose. That confidence is felt by your team and your clients alike. And here's the bonus. Mental models don't just help you, they help your team. When you talk through your surgical steps out loud, your technicians can anticipate your needs instead of scrambling. When you explain to a client, Here's the framework I use. They relax because they know there's a plan. In other words, your model becomes their model, and suddenly everyone around you feels more confident and more prepared. Mental models aren't just for practicing medicine. They're a leadership tool, a communication tool, and a way to become the kind of veterinarian everyone knows they can rely on. In short, they turn the storm of a clinic day into something a little more navigable and a lot less terrifying. Okay, let's talk about goals for a second. Goals are awesome. They tell you what you want to accomplish. Maybe it's improving team communication, getting faster at surgical prep, or finally mastering that tricky dental procedure. But here's the thing. Goals alone aren't enough. You know what to do, but how do you actually get yourself to do it consistently? That's where triggers come in. Triggers are these little cues that tell your brain it's time to act. And here's the magic. Our brains love patterns. The more you repeat an intentional action after a trigger, the more it becomes automatic. For example, if your goal is to reflect on the day's successes and challenges so you can keep learning and improving, then your trigger would be to, right after you close your computer at the end of the day, sit quietly with your eyes closed for 5 minutes. This small habit primes your mind for growth, and before you know it, reflection becomes your secret leadership superpower. Or maybe let's say your goal is to check in with your technicians every morning. If you set a trigger like, before I grab my first cup of coffee, I'll swing by the tech area, then over time, you won't even have to think about it. Boom, it's done. It becomes part of your daily rhythm, like brushing your teeth or cringing at the newest TikTok trend. Triggers are what take goals off the whiteboard and actually embed them into your day. Pair a goal with a trigger, and you're going to start building habits that reinforce your leadership, your communication, and your overall effectiveness in the clinic. Basically, triggers are the do it now button for your brain. Press them consistently, and your goals start running themselves. Effort without measurement is like running on a treadmill. You're burning energy, but you're not actually getting anywhere. And eventually, fatigue sets in. Tracking progress gives you feedback, it creates momentum, and it helps you refine your approach. Even small wins matter. They reinforce your sense of accomplishment and keep motivation high. For example, imagine a veterinary clinic aiming to reduce client wait times. Rather than just encouraging staff to be faster, you set a measurable goal. You track each day's average and share it with the team. When the number starts trending in the right direction, you celebrate the progress. Maybe a tech shaved 10 minutes off their morning appointments, or a new scheduling process improved flow. Each measurable improvement reinforces the team's confidence, highlight what works, and fuels continued effort. Over time, these incremental gains compound, creating a culture of accountability, efficiency, and pride in tangible results. Connect your actions to a why, not just a what. It's easy to fall into autopilot in veterinary medicine. You're charting labs, you're giving vaccines, you're running surgeries. But if all you're doing is going through the motion, consistency starts to feel like drudgery. The magic happens when you tie your actions to purpose, to a reason bigger than the task itself. Clients don't come to your clinic for just the what, the procedures, the tests, the treatments. Believe it or not, they actually come for your why, for the way you show up, the care you provide, and the impact that you make. When you call a client with lab results, it's not just an update. It's a demonstration that their pet matters to you, that their concerns are heard. When you perform surgery or administer care, it's not just medicine. It's a chance to strengthen the human-animal bond so families can enjoy more time together. And the same principle applies to leadership. When you lead a team, it's not only about delegating tasks, it's about helping your colleagues grow into the best versions of themselves, fostering confidence, resilience, and pride in their work. Here's an important point. Just putting your why on a wall, not enough. Your team won't internalize it unless you talk about it constantly. Share your why in meetings. Reference it in decisions. Highlight it in client interactions. The more your team hears and sees you live your purpose, the more it becomes part of the culture and guides consistent behavior. Consistency without purpose can feel like spinning your wheels. Consistency with a why transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. It reminds you that what you do every day isn't just medicine. It's improving lives, it's building trust, and creating moments that matter. The what may be necessary, but it's the why that fuels your energy, guides your decisions, and sustains your commitment when the days get long And boy, do they. So the next time you're buried under charts, phone calls, and that one patient who only purrs when you're not in the room, remember, your why is the reason you're really here, and it's worth talking about loudly, often, and sometimes with a little humor. Medicine is the science, but relationships are the glue that holds it all together. You can be the sharpest clinician in the room, able to diagnose complex cases and pull off the most technical surgeries. But if your team doesn't trust you or your clients don't feel heard, it won't matter. In fact, most complaints in veterinary medicine aren't about the medicine at all. They're about communication. Clients rarely say, "The doctor misread that blood work." What they do say, though, is, "Why didn't anyone explain that to me?" Or "Why didn't you call me after surgery?" The sting isn't in the medicine, it's in the perceived lack of care. That's why investing in relationships from day one is essential. Simon Sinek calls it creating a circle of safety. It's an environment where people know you've got their back. When your team and clients feel secure in that circle, they stop burning energy on self-preservation and start focusing on what really matters, which is patient care. So what does that look like in real life? Well, it's the small, everyday actions that accumulate into trust. When you thank your technician in front of a client for noticing a subtle lameness that maybe you missed, you're not just giving credit, you're showing your team that they're valued and respected. When you pull your receptionist aside and acknowledge how they gracefully handled an angry client at the front desk, you reinforce their worth in the clinic ecosystem. When you remember that Mrs. Johnson's cat prefers to be examined on the floor, shocker, or that her granddaughter just started college, you turn a transactional appointment into a relationship. These simple gestures build loyalty, not just from clients, but from the people working shoulder to shoulder with you. Relationships also create psychological safety, which research shows is the foundation of a high-performing team. When team members feel safe to ask questions, to admit mistakes, and speak up, performance soars. As a doctor, you set the tone by modeling humility. Saying, "I don't know, but I'll find out," or "Thanks for catching that," might feel vulnerable in the moment, but it doesn't weaken your credibility. It actually strengthens it. One of the quickest ways to erode trust is pretending that you know everything. One of the fastest ways to build it is being honest, open, and willing to learn alongside your team. There was this one time I miscalculated a drug dose in treatment notes. Before it went to the patient, a technician flagged the error. At that moment, I had two choices. I could bristle and defend myself, or thank them. I chose gratitude. "Great catch. Thank you for saving us from a mistake." That acknowledgement not only reinforced that tech's confidence, but also sent a very clear message to the whole team. Catching each other's blind spots is welcome here. That's psychological safety in action. Relationships are not an extra in medicine. They're the foundation. They transform individuals into a team and a clinic into a community. They're what keep clients returning, staff engaged, and the work itself meaningful. At the end of the day, being a great veterinarian and a great leader has less to do with knowing every answer and more to do with showing up consistently, intentionally, and with purpose. It's the habits that you build, the mental models you use, the triggers you set, and the relationships you nurture that define your success. Your why is what fuels all of it. It gives meaning to the long hours, the tough cases, and the never-ending decisions you face. Consistency builds trust, confidence, and momentum. Relationships create a culture where your team feels supported and your clients feel heard. Your legacy? It's not in the big flashy moments you hope will define your career. It's actually in the small, deliberate actions you take every single day. So here's the challenge. Pre-decide your priorities, build your mental models, reinforce your habits, and invest in your people. Do that, and you won't just survive the whirlwind of veterinary medicine. You'll thrive, inspire, and make a lasting impact on your team, your clients, and the animals you care for. Lead with purpose, act with intention, make your why your compass, because when you do, the chaos turns into clarity, the work turns into meaning, and the results, well, they speak for themselves.